From the heart of Dubai, this is Sports Unhinged with Mohamed.
And we are on. Thanks for joining us. This is Sports Unhinged. My name is Mohamed. We're very excited about this show today. A lot to cover. If you're listening last week, I mentioned that we were going to cover the UFC 214 review. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the boxing. Adrian Broner had an interesting fight. But your feedback has been absolutely phenomenal. And the most common piece of feedback that I got from last week is, dude, you talked about the NBA, you talked about the NFL, you talked about the boxing. Where is the football? The Premier League is less than 2 weeks away. Right now, it's about a week away. And you didn't even touch the football. So guess what, guys? I'm scratching all of that UFC and boxing talk out of the podcast today. We're going to focus about football. And the reason why I decided to do that is because the headline that's been dominating the sports world for the last week is obviously the transfer of Neymar Jr. from Barcelona to PSG. And a lot of reasons came out for why Neymar wanted to move from Barcelona or move on from Barcelona. And the most common reason that we saw out there is that he wanted to step out of Messi's shadow. He felt that it's time for him to go out there, become the focal point of a team, maybe win the Ballon d'Or, especially if he performs very well in the World Cup. And Barcelona kind of inserted a 222 million euro buyout clause last year to be more of a not for sale sign, because it's an absolutely ridiculous figure to put out there. And it seems like, the speculation is that Neymar playing second fiddle to Lionel Messi is one of the key motivations for him to move on. Now, if you're listening last week, you would have heard me talk about how Kyrie Irving in the NBA wanted to move from the Cleveland Cavaliers so that he doesn't have to play with LeBron anymore. So we're seeing a lot of parallels here. Kyrie, just like Neymar Jr., playing with arguably the best player in the world. They felt that, they're a young talent and they don't want to be the sidekick anymore, and they want to move on and become the focal point of a team. So technically, my take should be very similar to the take that I had last week on Kyrie Irving. Only it's not, because this is completely different. We have a price tag, a transfer that has just been confirmed, that has made the sport of football completely unrecognizable right now. Last year, Paul Pogba broke the world record with a 105 million euro transfer. Neymar has just doubled that. And this is really ugly. They are taking the game of football away from the fans. Money is ruining the sport. And that's why I think that this transfer is very dangerous. The repercussions from this transfer is just going to make everything go out of hand even more, because football is turning from a sport to Wall Street. And we all know what happens in Wall Street. They rig the rules. They rig the game to their benefit. Now, the big question is that if this transfer goes through, how is PSG going to pay for it and still comply with the financial fair play rules? That still exists, by the way. They introduced it to make football more fair, to control the crazy money, and it's not working. So if this transfer actually goes through without any sanctions levied on PSG, I believe that this means that the financial fair play rules, or this concept, it's a myth. Because the rich are going to keep getting richer, and the poor are going to keep getting poorer. Now, there's been a lot of controversy, a lot of conspiracy theories. And I read somewhere, that the PSG are trying to say that the Qatar government is paying for this transfer because they want Neymar to be representing them in the World Cup. I've read somewhere also that they're going to give Neymar the money and that he's going to go and buy himself out of his contract. I don't know what's the truth anymore. I think a lot will have to come out. We're going to keep following this and see what the technicalities of this is. But you know what? This is what happens when countries and governments start owning football teams. And if this was all about just financial penalties, you know, Neymar moves to PSG, FIFA slaps a God knows how many $million fine on the owners, they'll pay it. You're talking about a government that owns a football team here. They don't really care about the financial penalties. But it'll be interesting to see whether there's going to be an expulsion from the Champions League or something. And a lot of the talk that's been going around now is that Neymar leaving will hurt Spanish football. I don't think so. Not when Real and Barcelona are generally either the first or the second choice destinations in the world for the world's best players. By this time next year, they will overpay for another, up-and-coming player or a well-proven player. They might get a Dembele or an Mbappe, who are the new generation of football. Maybe they'll get Hazard. They'll replace him. That's not what's hurting Spanish football. What's hurting Spanish football is the fact that Barcelona and Real Madrid have had the main share of the TV rights pie, or the biggest slice for too long, for the last God knows how many years. I think the new rules have just been implemented to kind of make it a more equitable distribution of the funds between all of the teams, which I think is great, but it's a bit too late because those two teams have basically outgrown the rest of the league. And they are, a lot of the arguments is that, they spend what they make. It's ridiculous. These guys, Real Madrid, Barcelona, they can afford to have a couple of $100 million in debts. It makes it manageable. But let's go back to Neymar. I don't think that him winning things in France will mean anything. A lot of pressure is going to be on him to win the Champions League, which he'll struggle to do with PSG. We have to factor in, there's a rebuilding Premier League right now. They're trying to make the fixtures a bit more flexible so that the English teams are not playing so much and they can perform better in the European tournaments. We've gotten teams that are being reborn, like Milan, for example. So the competition is going to become harder. And the funny thing about this all, we're talking about the crazy money that's going on right now. Jose Mourinho had an interview with the BBC last week in which he said that clubs are paying, quote, too much to sign players and creating a very strange and out of control transfer market, unquote. Now, Mr. Mourinho, you are absolutely correct. You are right. But guess what? You are the last person I want to hear this from. It is absolutely hypocritical for Jose Mourinho in Manchester United to sit there and utter these words out of his mouth. Last year, you broke the bank for a world record transfer for Pogba. This year, you spent a ridiculous amount, 84 million euros, for Lukaku. Folks, do you know that Lukaku, as of now, is the 7th most expensive football player in the history of football? All time. Morata is the 10th most expensive football player in the history of football. And I have to mention this one too. Kyle Walker is 26th on that list. Can you tell me if Kyle Walker even makes the top 26 list of the best defenders in Europe or in the world? I miss the way football used to be. Do you guys remember, I was talking with a friend the other day, and we were just reminiscing about the way football used to be, and he told me, he's like, do you remember when Denilson used to be the most expensive player in the world? And I just laughed. Football had a different flavor back then. A year later, Christian Vieri broke the record, moving from Lazio to Inter for 32 million. A lot of you might say, well, Mohamed, market grows, there's inflation to factor in. I've actually seen people saying that the 222 million tag on Neymar is not that expensive when you think about it. I find that absolutely ridiculous. If we take Christian Vieri's 32 million transfer fee and adjust it for inflation today, that's 66 million. Can you guys tell me what 60 million will get you in today's market? Maybe an Oscar to a Chinese club? It won't even get you a Raheem Sterling these days. We've let the money men ruin our game. And everyone's like, yeah, well, that's not my money. If they want to spend 222 million, let them spend 222 million. Where do you think this cost will have to be recovered? From who? I'll tell you from who. From us, the fans. We are being robbed, hustled, bamboozled, and it's all because they know that we love this game so much. Do you want to go see a local Premier League club play a football game in the stadium? Just take an average team. You know how much that will cost you? £45 a ticket. You want to get a drink while you're at the stadium? That's £5. You want to get a hot dog? That's another £5. You want to buy a replica shirt? That's going to be £40, if not more. In the UK, they spend a ridiculous amount of money for cable subscriptions to watch the football. Arsenal are charging close to £900 for a season ticket this year. They have to recover the costs. They have to keep playing or paying their players 100, 150k every week somehow. Now, I'm not advocating piracy before I say what I'm about to say, but these teams are going to have to see some reaction from the fans. I wouldn't blame anybody for going out there and getting a free internet stream to watch their games, to go buy counterfeit shirts and footballs. They need to realize that in time, the fans need to be treated with a little bit more respect. I have a lot of friends that fly from Dubai to the UK at least once or twice a year to watch football games. And I see a pattern here. People come back and say, you know, the atmosphere at the Emirates, in the Etihad, at Old Trafford, it's not as great. The atmosphere is a bit shot. Because a lot of the people in that stadium, I won't say most, there's a lot of kind of loyal fans that still go every week, but we're seeing an increasing number of gentrified fans and tourists going to these football games. You know who I don't hear this from? A colleague of mine that supports Crystal Palace. In fact, they get probably the best atmosphere out there. I'm a Valencia supporter. And in case you wonder why, I'm actually part Spanish. My grandmother comes from Valencia, so I've never had a choice. I would love to support a Barcelona or Real Madrid, but I don't have a choice. And I will be in Spain next week, and I hope I can get tickets for the first game of the season for Valencia. I think I'll enjoy myself. I think there'll be a very good atmosphere out there. Maybe not so much at the Emirates. The money is unsustainable for most clubs, and the bubble needs to burst at some point. And it will. It's absolutely insane. Last year, I thought that Manchester United hurt football by paying as much as they paid for Pogba. This Neymar transfer tops it by a mile. And if all this crazy spending and freewheeling keeps going on, I just don't know what's going to happen to the sport. There was a starting point where this happened. You know, if we look back, this all started with the oil money infiltrating football. And it started with Abramovich at Chelsea. And none of us saw that this business model was going to spread like a cancer throughout the sport. There's no way most clubs can compete. If we see the likes of Arsenal and Spurs who are trying to stay sane in this crazy market, they're not going crazy on transfers, hats off to them, but you're not going to compete. I honestly have not been able to enjoy football in the same way that I used to enjoy it when I was a kid. And I used to think it's because, you know, when you're a child, when you're a teenager, you're more excited about everything than an adult is. But I don't think that's it. Right now, I'm really thinking that the sport has actually changed. I mentioned that I'm a Valencia supporter, but I'm also a Juventus supporter. And it all started when I was 11 years old because Del Piero became my absolute sporting hero. He was my idol. And although I lived in England for 6 years, I don't support any Premier League teams. But I watch the Premier League more than any other league because it's the most competitive. But still, it doesn't have the same flavor it used to have before. Because the money is ruining this competitiveness. Competition should be on the field. Right now it's happening at the bank, in the bank accounts. Neymar, 220 million. The rumors about Mbappe at 180 million. I cannot imagine that. He's 18 years old, for God's sake. When you spend that kind of money, you better be sure of what you get. The sample size for Mbappe is so small. And when we're talking about 222 million, we're talking about 180 million. These are human beings, by the way. They might be playing a League Cup game against a second division team who has this one defender that's been trying to make it as a football player all his life at the top level, and he can't. And he might look at a Neymar or an Mbappe and say, you know what, I'm going to break this guy's legs today. I'm going to go in with a 2-foot challenge and break this guy's leg. It could happen. What happens to your investment now? The 220 million. In between the three oil money teams, we're talking about Chelsea, Man City, and PSG, the amount of money that they've spent is absolutely incredible. It feels like it's $1 billion right now. And the old money teams, the Bayerns, the Real, the Juve, the Barças, the Man U's, they're not any better either. The point here is the sporting competitiveness. There's no fun to be in a sport or being a sports fan when the competitive field is skewed so badly. If we look at the financial gap between the top 6 teams and the bottom 6 teams in the Premier League, it is alarming. If you look at the gap between the bottom 6 in the Premier League and the bottom 6 in Serie A or La Liga, it's even more frightening. Football is becoming an investment hobby for the ultra-rich. Don't get me wrong, it's still the best sport. I'll watch football over golf or cricket any day of the week. No offense to those other sports. It's the free market. This is the free market. Well, the free market concept is being shoved down our throats by the Americans, isn't it? Let the market correct itself. Let's look at American sports. American sports are not the markets are not necessarily that free. But I feel that the Americans are onto something with their restrictive practices that they impose in their games. They have salary caps, trading only happens for other players or draft picks. It's not perfect. Especially in baseball, for example, the practices of salary dumping and cash considerations are there. But when we look at the NFL, hard salary cap, NBA, soft salary cap with a luxury tax if you exceed it. That keeps the competition alive somehow. Now, from a political conviction point of view, I'm uncomfortable with having the wages of workers capped. And I've always argued that the salary caps should be increased quite significantly for both the NBA and the NFL. Maybe not so much the NBA, they're getting paid and they have the luxury tax option, so the owners actually have to spend. But in the NFL, definitely. But you cannot be the competitiveness that is in both of these sports. Let me read to you here the last 10 Super Bowl winners in the NFL. Let me just find my list. There we go. Indianapolis Colts, New York Giants, Pittsburgh Steelers, New Orleans Saints, Green Bay Packers, the Giants again, Baltimore Ravens, Seattle Seahawks, New England Patriots, Denver Broncos, and the Patriots again last year. So these are the last 10 Super Bowls. I've named 8 to 9 different teams that won the Super Bowl. Barcelona and Real Madrid have won 12 out of the 13 seasons in La Liga. The only other team that managed to come through is Atletico Madrid. Now, if the financial fair play had it in a way that the transfer amounts go down significantly and the players' wages go up, I wouldn't have an issue with that. If you tell me tomorrow that Cristiano Ronaldo has signed a 300 million euro contract per year as a salary, I'll be like, that's fine. That's their market value. These are the players that create all of this revenue. I'm just very uncomfortable with clubs getting that much for the transfers. 2 years ago, we experienced a miracle in the world of football. And the more or the crazier these transfer fees and the crazier the market gets in football, the more I appreciate the miracle that we experienced 2 years ago when we saw Leicester City win the Premier League. This was divine intervention. It was unbelievable. A group of 11 players and a manager just clicked for 38 games and managed to fight through the money and the transfers and the madness and the conglomerates. And it was just competition on the field, and they managed to win the Premier League. I've seen people that support Liverpool, Man United, Man City, Arsenal, everybody just turned and said, you know what, this year, the closer they got to the end of the season, they're like, I really hope that Leicester win it. Everybody appreciated what they were seeing at that time. But with what's going on right now, tell me, what chance does any player coming up from a youth system really got? Teams don't have patience. You want a player? Fine. Just take your wallet out, put down 50 million and just get a player. And what's worse is that big teams, the Chelseas, the Man U's, the Reals, the Barças, the PSGs, start implementing some kind of contractual restrictions that block youth players from moving from one club to another. This is mirroring the ugly side of the capitalist economy that we live in. Now, before you mistake me for a communist or a socialist, I'm a proud capitalist, but we have to recognize that in our capitalist society, there's an ugly side. And because of the money, certain individuals in the sport are being tagged or being given the titles of greatness, all-time greatness. One of these people is Pep Guardiola. Now, you've got two sides of the argument with Pep Guardiola. You've got a lot of fans that say that he had the best teams in the world. When you have Messi, Suarez, Neymar, of course you're going to win. So they give him no credit. And others are saying that he's an absolute genius, the tiki-taka and the whole thing. For me, honestly, when people ask me what I think of Pep Guardiola and where he sits on the all-time greatest coaches or the greatest coaches in the world today, I tell them, I don't know. I'm not sure. In my opinion, the jury is still out for Pep Guardiola, despite everything he's won. And the reason for that goes back to the money. In his stay in Barcelona, he spent 383 million euros on transfers. At Bayern Munich, 195 million. At Manchester City, he's banging on the door of €500 million already. Add those up, you're talking about €1 billion. I'd like to see a Brendan Rodgers or a Tony Pulis or a David Moyes have that much money. And I want to see what they do with it. But that's not even possible anymore because the club name is no longer the brand, it's the coach. No player who has won major titles home and abroad will go play for a manager that doesn't have a CV that is full of major titles in it. The perfect example for that was David Moyes. He was backed by the history of Manchester United, Alex Ferguson. In my opinion, the greatest club manager to ever walk the earth. What did David Moyes get? Fellaini from his old club, Everton. Had he tried to sign a Bale or a Ronaldo, I'm not sure if he did, but he would have failed. With all of the funds that the Premier League teams get from the TV money, they can get all the big players that they want right now, especially with this new equitable distribution of the TV rights. The smallest team can bid a lot of money for a good player. But none of these players are going to go to the smallest team because they don't have the managers with the titles in their CV. So what they'll end up doing is overpaying for an average player to come to their team. A-list managers attract the best players. There's nothing wrong with that. But we're seeing that wealthy owners right now are only trusting A-list managers to spend the money. If we look at a Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, Conte, Klopp, Zidane, Ancelotti, these guys will attract the best players. Back in the day, all it took for a player to want to move is if a team that has got history, we're talking about the Man U's, the Reals, Milan, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, if they came calling, the player moves. So now we've got money ruling first, a la the Neymar deal, followed by a manager with trophies. The club name has become almost irrelevant. Hence, we've seen the rise of a Chelsea, a Man City, and a PSG. We're seeing the resurgence of AC Milan right now with their new Chinese investors. Berlusconi had to sell the team. That team meant more to Berlusconi than any of us would like to believe. He had to sell that team because he could no longer compete with the market. Teams can no longer be a family-run business. Even with a guy like Berlusconi, with all of his dodgy money, he couldn't compete. And by the way, if you guys have not seen the documentary about Berlusconi in Netflix, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely fantastic. Just seeing the way this man thinks, it's truly something to behold. I don't care how low that documentary is rated. If you haven't seen it, go out there and see it. Anyways. Another thing I wanted to ask. Can somebody please just tell me or explain to me what the hype around Monaco players is all about? Because no doubt they had a terrific season, but did it not occur to anybody, especially those big teams that are bidding crazy amounts for the players, did it not occur to them that it could have been a Leicester City situation where it just happens that players clicked together as a unit for one season and did a good job? The squad just clicked. Maybe individually these players might not reach the same levels elsewhere. Can we see a bit more sample size before we start bidding 180 million for an Mbappe? We need that sample size. I remember when Harry Kane scored his first 20-plus goal season, everybody wrote him out as a one-hit wonder. Which was correct. We need to see more sample size. Then he followed that up with another 20-plus season or a 19-goal season. Then another. Now I'm comfortable with them bidding whatever they want to bid for Harry Kane, if somebody wants to buy him. But Mbappe pretty much had half a great season, and already we are anointing him the hybrid between Ronaldo and Thierry Henry. The Brazilian Ronaldo, that is. Can I see him play one more season, pretty please, before you make your minds up? But hey, if Neymar is worth 222 million, if Manchester City have spent 200 million on their defense alone, what's that going to get you in these days? 3 or 4 Sigurdssons? It's absolutely ridiculous. Anyways, enough of me ranting about the money in football. I'd like to hear what you guys think. Leave your comments, send us the emails. If you'd like to appear as guests on the podcast or call in, please let us know as well. All of the details should be there. When we come back now, I'm going to give you my top 6 teams in the Premier League and where they're going to finish this season. So the predictions are coming up.
You're listening to the Sports Unhinged podcast.
I'm going to make some predictions right now for the Premier League. It's starting in next week on August 11th. And it's just long awaited. I honestly find these summers absolutely torturous. I can't stand them, especially the odd number years. You know, when it's the 2013s, the 15s, the 17s, and there is no international tournament going on. There's no World Cups. There's no Euros. And you're sitting here all summer just begging for some football. You're playing FIFA every day. You start getting into other sports. I honestly got into the NBA and the NFL for the last 7-8 years because of these summers. Now, not so much the NFL because it happens at the same time as the football season, but the playoffs in the NBA, at least you have some kind of sports. Nothing, though, is like football. And the Premier League is starting again. I'm going to make some predictions on, sixth position all the way to the top position. And guys, these predictions are silly. Anyone that makes predictions is doing it out of emotion, even if they claim to have their reasons and that they're using their heads and not their hearts. But there's always some emotion into it, even for a neutral fan like me. I don't support any Premier League team. And I'm going to make some predictions. And the funny thing about predictions is that somebody listening today is going to turn around and say, this guy knows nothing about football, because I might have ranked their team a bit too low or a team that they hate a bit too high. But guys, if my fantasy football record goes by anything, I'm probably going to be wrong. But here's what I think, or I hope, the top 6 predictions are going to be. So starting from number 6. So 6th position, I've got Tottenham Hotspur. The Spurs finishing at 6th. I think the biggest transfer out they have had is Kyle Walker. But otherwise in the transfer market, they kind of stood pat. They didn't really have any big signings. And it's just simple. It's a money formula. With all of the transfers that are going on and all the talent that is being exchanged in all the other teams, I don't think that they'll be able to compete. I hope I'm wrong. And I still think that Harry Kane is going to score a ton of goals this season. But something tells me this competing for the title, being a top flight team, I think that kind of falls apart. Again, I hope I'm wrong, but I think the Spurs finish at 6th. In 5th place. And before I go into this, let me just be very open and admit to you all that with my prediction of the 5th place, I am drinking some haterade here. I'm drinking some haterade. There's a lot of hating going on, but I hope that Manchester City finishes in 5th place. And I hope that they finish in 5th place for the sake of the sport of football. I just spent half an hour ranting about what money is doing to football. And I didn't mention that the one thing that I hope happens is that everything that represents this insane money fails. So I am putting Man City at the 5th place. They miss out on the Champions League. Like I said, for me, the jury is still out on Pep Guardiola because of the money argument and how much he tends to spend. But I also feel that he overspent on certain players that don't necessarily have the talent to match that price tag. If we look at the defense alone, I mean, we're looking at 32 million Mangala, 30 million Otamendi, 50 million Stones, 50 million for Kyle Walker, for the love of God, 52 million for Mendy. Mendy's a great defender. I think he'll do well. But again, the price tag, 27 million on Danilo. The man has spent close to 293 million pounds on defense. Now, I don't hate Pep Guardiola. I honestly feel that, yes, he does give the team the identity. He gives them a personality. But with all the money that he's spending right now, there's going to be higher expectations. There's going to be more accountability at the club. And they're going to want to see results on the pitch. I'm sure one of the rules that they've put down for Guardiola for spending all of this money is that you have to get some results on the field. I don't see how anybody that spent 300 million pounds on, some of these are bang average players, if we're honest with ourselves. I haven't seen anyone spend that much, not get results on the field, or not get trophies and still keep their jobs. Pep Guardiola's right now, he's playing football manager or championship manager with a cheat mode, with all of the spending that's going on. Mendy will be a very good player, I feel. Man City, again, I hope they finish 5th. They've got a roster worth 750 million pounds at the moment. People criticize Mourinho for having the most expensive squad ever assembled. His squad is at around 518 million. So City finishes 5th for me. In 4th place, I've got Arsenal. And I am so happy that I'm not an Arsenal fan, because if I was, I would be suicidal. Arsenal are the biggest teasers in the football world. They tease you every season. This year we're gonna get something. We're gonna break through in the Champions League. We're going to break through in the Premier League. But at the end, what do they represent? They are the epitome of mediocrity. They have Arsene Wenger, who I don't feel is a motivator. He is probably the best CFO in the football business, but he's not the greatest coach. If we look at the locker room right now, a lot of news coming out of there that there's a lot of tension and unhappiness. Alexis Sanchez is always unhappy. Giroud is not happy with the new signing of Lacazette. It's not a healthy environment. So in my opinion, despite all of that, Arsenal might do well, but they'll finish in 4th. In 3rd place, I have got Liverpool. And I have a problem with Liverpool. And the problem that I have with them right now is that their manager has made them very likable. I enjoyed hating on Liverpool because of the Liverpool fans that I know. The people I know that support Liverpool are absolutely the worst. When they're winning, if they win 3 games in a row, they just come there and spread their muscles and say, we're going to win the league this year. We're going to win the Champions. We're going to win everything. The minute they start losing, they turn into historians. We won all of these trophies back when I wasn't born. So now I'm finding myself liking this team because of their manager, because of Klopp. But for them to finish 3rd, they have to keep Coutinho. They cannot lose him. They've already botched the Van Dijk deal. We're hearing now that it might come around and it might work. Keita is not going there anymore. So it's basically Salah and the existing team. And being part of 4 competitions will eventually wear on them. But if we look at Liverpool, they look deadly this season. I like Salah and Coutinho and how they link up. I've seen a few highlights of preseason games. And the way that they linked up, the chemistry that was instantly there, it reminded me of the Gerrard and Torres setup. Obviously not as good. Let's not jump to conclusions. But let's see where this season takes them. Emre Can and Henderson can play as a unit in the midfield. Hopefully Firmino, maybe Sturridge will be slotting home. Now the problem with Liverpool, and the reason I think why they can't compete for the championship, is because of the defense. The defense is not solid. They definitely need to reinforce the defense. Van Dijk has not been signed. They need to find a way of getting him. They need to get a left back. But it definitely looks like it's going to be a good year for Liverpool. They're building the team very nicely. Good signings. I think they do okay. But if they lose Coutinho, I definitely can't see them challenging for the league or the Champions League. And especially at this time, at this point in the transfer market, if they lose him, they won't have enough time to find a replacement. So they might hold their own up until Christmas. But again, if you have the likes of Sturridge putting in another sick note for the stupidest of reasons, I just think they go on a bad streak. But basically with Liverpool, I put a lot of stock on the team chemistry, and that's why I have them going on at 3rd. In 2nd place, Chelsea. I like Antonio Conte. He used to be one of my heroes growing up. At 11 years old, I had the Del Piero poster, and right next to it was a poster of Antonio Conte. Right next to that was a poster of Angelo Di Livio and Pessotto and Zidane. But Conte, I think, is a top manager. And Chelsea should do everything they can to keep him for as long as they can. He's, in my opinion, one of these rare breed in managers that really gets it. I honestly thought when he moved to Chelsea that the language barrier was going to be an issue. But he immediately found a way of ingratiating himself with the players. He's an absolutely great manager. And he tends to have this ability to separate the white noise that's surrounding football and just focusing or distilling everything down to the players and what happens on the pitch. And I love these Italian coaches like him and Ancelotti. With Conte, you get a lot of the pitch side theatrics. So if we put that aside, you see these guys and you genuinely believe they're really good guys. This is the kind of guy you want to hang around with. I don't know, maybe it's an Italian thing. Now, the one mistake I think Chelsea made this off-season is letting go of Matic. Not letting him go, I have no problem with him leaving Chelsea. I don't think it affects the team very well. But the fact that they let him go to Manchester United, that's a bad idea. They're basically strengthening their rivals. They made the same mistake with Petr Cech going to Arsenal. I would have rather taken less money for Nemanja Matic and had him transferred to a team outside of the Premier League than sell him to Manchester United. I think Morata is a fantastic transfer. It might take him a little bit of time to settle in, but I think he's perfectly suited to combine with the Hazards, the Pedros, the Fabregas, Willian. They've got a fantastic unit around them. And Diego Costa is on his way out. As brilliant as Diego Costa is, we've seen him in the past. He could go missing in games when he doesn't feel like he's up to it, where things are not going his way. I think Morata, in his time at Real Madrid, has shown better positional awareness than Diego Costa. He's got excellent speed. He's got excellent skill. He's better in the air. And, you know, Diego's definitely a stronger guy. He gives you that attitude, but he can go missing. Morata might not be competing on the physical level with Diego Costa, but I think he'll prove himself very well. And that leaves us with first place. And don't call me a closet Man United fan, because I am not, but I feel that Manchester United win the Premier League this season. They make the biggest jump from 6th to 1st. They have Lukaku, Rashford, Martial. I don't think Mourinho will buy another central striker. In terms of replacing Rooney, I think they have a lot of players. Mata, Mkhitaryan, Pogba. A lot of people can play in that particular role. Andreas Pereira can play in that deeper role as well. And the reason why I say Man United win the league this year is because they had 15 draws last season that they could easily turn into wins. They were just missing that little bit of defensive discipline last season. And I think Matic moving there, although the 40 million price tag could be considered a bit out there, and he's played with Mourinho before, might not have been the best version of himself in the past, but guess what? He's back playing for Mourinho right now. And who knows, maybe he'll be able to use him properly this time around. And I have a feeling that he'll be the right player at the right time. He's got a lot of experience, and I think he will put a lot of discipline. And come on, guys, anything is a step up from Marwan Fellaini. Out of the 15 draws last season, I can remember off the top of my head 3 or 4 where Marwan Fellaini came in the last 5 minutes and conceded a penalty or an own goal or had an embarrassing error that caused the goal. The reason why Man United had 15 draws last season is because of a bad midfield and a bad defense. And these issues are related. But because of the bad defensive midfield position that they had, a lot of the players had to come back and help out in defense. The Pogbas, the Herreras could not just be completely free to go out there and attack. They could not utilize the speed and the tactical skills that they had to focus on attacking. So with a specialist defensive midfielder in Matic, the midfield now I feel is much stronger. They can assist the defense a lot better, and Pogba and Herrera can link up much better with the already faster attack. And I think Lukaku is going to do a good job. There's Premier League experience counts for something. He might not be the most active player, but he's a fantastic finisher. He has a lot of good physicality, very strong. And it might be a blessing, you know. Mourinho wanted Morata, he had to settle for Lukaku. He wanted Dyer, he had to settle for Matic. Sometimes these going for the second choice might work out a lot better. It's a team game. A lot of synergetic effects there by adding the right components. And I think Manchester United have done that this season. And I feel that the Mourinho is the master at this. Anyways, this brings us to the end of the podcast. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to this football special. Please rate us on your iTunes, Apple Podcast app, on Stitcher. You can find us on SoundCloud, www.soundcloud.com/Sports Unhinged. Same with Facebook. You can find us at facebook.com/Sports Unhinged, and you can find us on YouTube as well. Please leave us some comments. Let us know what you think. And thanks again for being with us on Sports Unhinged. Until next time, take care.